Welcome to the Phillip Wiley Show. Take a look behind the curtain of professional hacking and hear compelling discussions with guests from diverse backgrounds who share a common curiosity and passion for challenges and their job. And now, here's your host, offensive security professional, educator, mentor, and author, Phillip Wiley.
Hello and welcome to a new episode. I'm really excited to have my good friend and former coworker, Corey LeBleu, joining me today. We worked together in my very first pen test job back consulting. So it was pretty interesting. Corey's been one of the people that I really relied on a lot when I was starting out. We got to do probably one of my most favorite all-time pen tests was the one we're on site for that large law firm in Dallas. And there was like 5 or something of us that we had to get as much done as we could in 40 hours. Is a lot of fun, and we got to kind of know each other a little bit better then. So it's a really honor and pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome, Corey.
Thanks a lot, Phil. Yeah, that was a fun engagement. I think it was me, you, Matt, and Jason.
Yeah.
So yeah, that building was about the swankiest building I've ever been in.
It was pretty amazing, the cars outside that place.
I saw two Bentleys.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that you go to some of these other law firms or things, and you'll see like a Lexus or something, or a Mercedes, but Bentleys and Porsches and whatever else they had there was pretty amazing.
Yeah, just the lobby of that place was fancier than any hotel I've been in.
One of the interesting things too, I share a lot with people too, that sometimes companies rely on consultants to point out vulnerabilities and stuff, because sometimes their company doesn't listen. But remember, the chief security officer was pointing out vulnerabilities to us so we'd find it so it could end up in a report and finally get fixed.
Yeah, I liked him. He was a good guy. Where is he from? Sweden or something?
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, we don't normally always get that kind of helpfulness. Sometimes trying to deal with the customers, sometimes they're not always so keen on you finding vulnerabilities. But it was interesting that he wanted to make sure everything was uncovered so they could justify remediation.
I remember you digging around in an unauthenticated database, if I recall.
Actually, I think that was Carter. Actually, I believe that was my funny experience. There was the first time I accidentally DOSed something because I was using a Metasploit module and didn't notice that it was a denial of service.
Yeah, I've done worse. My network pen testing days trying to do ARP spoofing and not properly forwarding packets. That was fun.
So before we get too far into the show, why don't you introduce yourself, kind of, how you got started and kind of where you're at today in your career?
Yeah, Corey LeBleu. I've been doing this about 19 years, offensive security consulting. The first 10 years were all network based testing. It's kind of before the modern red teaming era. So kind of got bored with that a little bit and moved into the web app stuff. While I was doing the network testing, I was working for a company, Digital Defense, and I was able to disclose several CVEs, including Citrix and Apple products. So that kind of is what got me into the web app stuff. Then I had an OWASP project that was kind of short-lived, based on like trying to design a scanner, like the OWASP Web Application Scanner Specification Project, which kind of spelled out OWASP. So then I got to Verizon, where I did more of the app testing and some network testing, and that's where we met. I was at Verizon for the majority of 10 years, with 1 year away at this company called ISE. I believe one of your old podcast from your other podcast works there. But yeah, I went back to Verizon from there, and then just recently had moved into more of a managerial / technical role as a practice manager at a company called Set Solutions. And I just left there, and I'm kind of feeling out my next steps.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I think one of the things that listeners would be interested in, because I know a lot of people are so fascinated with the physical and social engineering part, and you have a lot of experience with that. And you kind of got started out that way, didn't you?
Yeah, my first job, I was doing a lot of social engineering. It's fun. It's fun at first, and then it kind of gets to be where it's just stress. Behind me, I have a poster of all my fake IDs made into a poster. Just so it's gonna see your ID. They're horrible. I mean, they were my old boss's body with my head superimposed in Microsoft Word and just laminated. And it always worked. You'd have a badge, and you'd show them the badge and the ID. Their eyes would go to the badge. You put her away before they could look at the ID. My supervisor, I think, even a few times put his weight on the ID as 500 pounds. Got noticed. Every time I got in trouble or close calls, it was never because of the ID. That was kind of surprising because they're really horrible. I'll send you a picture later.
Yeah, pretty amazing. So how elaborate did any of the uniforms that you used for any of those engagements?
We were going as like fire inspectors, so they were just kind of a generic looking fire inspector thing, and we just changed the monogramming on each suit. It was funny. One time I was going through airport security, and they decided to check my carry-on bag. Well, I have all sorts of uniforms, fake badges, fake IDs. They're tearing through all that and not paying attention. The thing that they questioned me on is I had bought a plastic like laser level just as a prop to put on my belt just to look as something. And that's what TSA quizzed me about. Just that. Not the IDs, not the uniforms.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Really only got in trouble right at the last time I did it. Yeah. I went to the client site, and there was a security guard there. He kind of tailed me the whole way, and I got away. But he was a little suspicious, and he happened to know the fire inspector, fire marshal. So he called him up, and client calls me, and they're like, "Get down here now." Well, I'm almost to the next sprint. No, get down here now. So I get there, and he is pissed. So in about 5 minutes, I'm in handcuffs, and get quizzed there, and then he's bringing me to the police station. He's like, "How much money do you make?" And I told him, and he's like, "For your age, that's pretty good. Not enough for this, though, is it?" I'm like, "That's why my resumes are out right now."
So was that your last physical?
Yes, and what's funny is once we got to the police station, it was like one of those rooms with like the kind of cubicle type walls, the really thin walls. And I heard him on the phone with the DA and got to hear the DA chew him out for cuffing me without arresting me.
I bet that was pretty scary, especially at that young of an age.
Yeah, because I was like 25 at the time, 25, 26.
So did you have your get out of jail free card?
Yeah, I did. He didn't seem to care. One time, I'm not sure if it was that one or another time, it may have been that one, I got busted, gave him my card. It had to have been that time because the client tried to deny that they knew we were dressing as the fire inspector, even though on the get out of jail free card, they explicitly said it with their signature right below it. So that was a little scary and frustrating.
Yeah, it's kind of a little, when you get the sore loser in one of those engagements compared to the frustrated system administrator that you end up, poning their systems and look bad. I guess it's kind of, these guys have a little more worse retaliation.
Yeah, on the social engineering engagements, which is always kind of awkward, is I'd go in there, dressed as fire marshal, do all this, and the next day I'd show up there in a suit and tie, and just some of the looks that people would give me, and I'd just be kind of like, "Sorry." They'd just do a double take.
So did you see, just interesting on some of those situations, do you see much cases where, people really got reprimanded or lost their jobs over some of the social engineering or physical assessments?
No, we actually had it written in the contract that they couldn't do that.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear.
As far as I know, no one did, but there were still some awkward situations.
Yeah, I've seen some other consultants that would not rat out who they were able to get over on because they didn't want someone to lose their job. But that's great that it's in the contract. And truly, people shouldn't do that anyway. They should, build that into their security awareness. And
not even everyone knows about it, like in a company. Like I've been to one where I actually social engineered the CEO. The CFO hired us. He didn't even tell the CEO. So I had the CEO like guiding me around the bank because when I used to do it, it was pretty much all banks and credit unions, like small banks and credit unions.
that's really good because, a lot of cases on some of those social engineering engagements, they usually have certain people that are out of scope. I did one time that like one of the upper management's son was out of scope. He was out of scope. The CEO, there were several people that were out of scope for it, but you're really kind of, there's some potential vulnerabilities there that you're not going to expose if you take people out of the scope.
I mean, it's kind of scary how much just being a uniform works. Like people don't question it. It's all attitude, all just going in there and looking the part. You don't have to know the whole thing. Like it's a fire marshal, you don't have to know everything. You just have to know a little bit more than the person that you're talking to.
Yeah. So did you ever use a persona of someone that was like management or anything like that?
As far as I recall, it was all fire inspector or OSHA. Basically, an occupation that would give you access to the entire facility, because you want to be able to get in the vault, etc. So, fire inspector has access, OSHA inspector may have access. I think other people use like electrician, whatnot.
So when you kind of moved out of the social and physical security, did you like the network and web app pen testing better than you did the social engineering and physical?
Well, I was doing the social engineering and the networking stuff at the same time, and as well as network vulnerability assessments and policy review type stuff. And I just pretty much swore off the social engineering after that. Like in my resume, you won't even see a reference to it.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah, and the thing that's crazy about it is the in-person social engineering. I always found it easier than on the phone, because on the phone people are kind of suspicious. But you go in there looking the part, they're not going to question you as much.
Yeah, that's a good point, because anytime you get a call nowadays, especially, you question whether it's legitimate, because I know like on my cell phone, it's rare that I actually get a call from someone that's actually legit. It's usually someone either trying to sell something, either trying to scam you. So I can see where in person works better.
Yeah. And that's even with spoofing phone numbers and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. Spoofing phone numbers. Remember some of those sites or services that you could use that actually change your voice too. If you called through, would change your voice.
Yeah. I had one of those. I probably still have credits for it somewhere.
I did that one time. I was testing one out one time for an engagement. I was playing around with it, and I pranked my mom. I called my mom and spoofed a phone number from like her sister.
Yeah, I pranked somebody. I don't remember, but I was actually using it for work as well. Just one of those paid services. But if you have the access to the PBX and stuff like this one company, they would just do it themselves. Didn't have to use a third party service.
Very cool. So what's like one of your favorite all-time hacks? So something you exploited that was probably like your most prized hack.
There are a few that were interesting. One, it was just the sheer number of vulnerabilities. I found a vulnerability that allowed cross-site scripting or cross-site request forgery to upload a document with a malicious file like .exe, and it also had persistent cross-site scripting in the file name.
Oh, wow.
That was neat. And then another time was hacking a point of sale system. Basically got in through a web app and then jumped around into some computers and ran like a memory scanning program to read gift card numbers from memory.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty cool. They're wanting that tested after the whole Target fiasco and all that.
Yeah. Something else that was kind of just thought about, since you've been in pen testing for so long, the offensive security side, compared to when you started, compared to now, how do you rate the difficulty to be able to hack into something? And as far as just what you have to learn nowadays compared to before, how would you compare the two?
Like I do mainly applications. Applications are just a lot more hardened. You'll still see some of the stuff. It depends on the client, really. Like one of my more recent clients, they're pretty locked down. You're not really finding anything for them. I've never even found a high vulnerability for them. But some you'll still see cross-site scripting, a lot more on the persistent cross-site scripting. All the reflected sometimes gets cleared up really easy, but if you leave breadcrumbs kind of define HTML injection, you can sometimes find stored cross-site scripting. A lot of those vulnerabilities that I disclosed, like the one with Apple and a few others, were all directory traversal vulnerabilities. And like, I never see directory traversal vulnerabilities anymore. But back then, you could just point a commercial scanner at an app, an unknown app, and you got a directory traversal vulnerability.
Yeah, I guess it seems like people have gotten a lot better with AppSec these days and WAFs.
Yeah, and SQL injection is still out there, but it's generally more complex. You'll see more blind than you would way back when. It was like always just an error message that told you everything.
Yeah. So for someone that's wanting to get started out, what would you do now? Because you've kind of seen how things evolve. What's the best way for someone that wants to get started in pen testing?
Well, I got interested in it. I read about it in like Network World interview with a pen tester. And I was just kind of like, wow, I want to do that. So I got CCNA and Security Plus, and I'd worked at a few help desks. And from there, I got my first pen test job, which was all the social engineering and network stuff. And kind of signed on for pennies, but then, as a profession, as you get more experienced, it can pay a lot better. But nowadays, I think I'd tell people, like, obviously the background for like the CCNA is good, but the OSCP, I know you have that. That's kind of a good start. Like hiring managers seem to recognize that a lot.
So yeah, nowadays, do you think one of the things I've kind of seen, just curious what your views are, is one of the things I've noticed, and I have some friends that are pretty good in pen testing, but they don't have the web app pen testing background, but they seem to have a difficult time. So it really seems, from what I've seen, that you really need to have more of a web app pen testing background than what you previously had to have.
Yeah, I mean, it's just more complex, a lot more things thrown in. You'll see random stuff like WebSockets, REST APIs. Used to see SOAP APIs, which don't really see that anymore. The first security tool that I wrote was kind of a dumb SOAP fuzzer that just iterated over FuzzDB and threw it at SOAP services. But yeah, a lot more understanding on the API stuff. I mean, even that, I'm still wrapping my head around some of it. It's just so different than just your traditional testing.
It's really interesting how we didn't have much good resources for learning API pen testing until recently.
Yeah, I mean, I just finished the book Hacking APIs a few weeks ago, I guess. Was messing with the OWASP Juice shop and the OWASP Crappy Vulnerable API. I've heard about like a API University, I think it's called. I've seen that on LinkedIn, but haven't had a chance to mess with it yet. I think they offer free API security training.
Yeah, that one's a pretty good one. The pen testing one's done by Corey LeBleu, the author of that book that you were mentioning. And then they just released a new one. It's just API security in general, not focused just on pen testing.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely where it's moving, is the API stuff. And even your traditional thick client apps, like some people are rewriting them to interface with a REST API on the back end instead of just a traditional thick client server structure.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too when you mentioned that and thinking about APIs. Remember back in the day when we had the middleware servers before APIs, you had like Microsoft BizWorks to be able to interconnect different platforms.
Yeah. Still see that sometimes. I had something I was going to say, I forgot.
But yeah, just kind of interesting to see how that's changed, because I remember that Microsoft BizWorks, and I guess it's really kind of when XML started coming around for interoperability through different systems and stuff through like the middleware servers.
Yeah, speaking of like the XML, like I was talking about SOAP earlier, one thing that was kind of funny was there's a website I was testing, and they had installed like a forum on top of the regular app. Just I don't know why they installed it, but it had a default like SOAP web service, and it had a or one equals one SQL injection vulnerability. So through this SOAP interface, I could pull their entire database.
Oh, wow.
It was just using SQL map and just exploring the database.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, but you don't really see SOAP as much anymore, but REST is definitely where it's at.
Yeah. And did you see recently someone came out with the Black Hat GraphQL book? Have you checked that out yet?
No, I haven't. But I guess about 6 months ago, I ran across a GraphQL application, and I didn't even know what it was until GraphQL until I was testing it. And just learned about like introspection and stuff like that. Didn't really get too far, just that your basic testing kind of. So the hacking APIs book covers it a little bit. I kind of use that as reference. The GraphQL book wasn't out yet, but it'd be neat. I mean, I wonder if it'll take as long for that to be implemented as it did for REST, because REST, like back in my network pen testing days, they were talking about it, and it isn't until like really recent that you're seeing it prevalent.
Yeah. So what are kind of your views on someone that's getting started out? How important is it to learn Burp Suite?
If you're doing web app testing, it's just needed. I mean, that's what you do. I live in Burp Suite when I'm testing web apps. And nowadays they have all sorts of extensions to help with different things for it, from encoding, decoding to supporting things like SAML, REST, authentication testing, etc. It's just really extensible. And that's another thing. I've written scripts for Burp Suite in the past, but they're kind of, the functionality's kind of been implemented into Burp Suite, so that's kind of dead and gone.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how things like Burp Suite has made things easier, because it seemed like at one time to do some of the things you'd need to know how to script or code to do certain things, but it seems like the tools have evolved where you don't have to rely as much on scripting and coding these days.
Yeah, and Burp also has that Python API, so that makes it even easier interfacing with Python instead of having to learn Java. But yeah, whenever I got started, the first proxy I was messing with was Paros, if you remember that.
Yep, I remember that.
And I think that actually, the base of that actually became Zap, if I recall.
Yeah, I believe so. And then even like Dirbuster is actually kind of built it, that some of that logic or programming is built into Zap, I believe, too.
Yeah, it's crazy how many Dirbuster clones they have, GoBuster and
Yeah.
whatever.
So what's your favorite fuzzer to use?
I live in Burp.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. I live in Burp Repeater more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't use Intruder that much, but I'll have 110 repeater tabs open.
Sound like me,
literally.
sound like me. Well, actually, my browser tabs are worse than that.
Yeah. So, yeah, just really live inside Burp doing web app tests. Also if I'm using Intruder, using something like sec lists or whatnot, those dictionaries kind of used to be FuzzDB, and then have more advanced lists out now. But,
Yeah.
So I live inside Repeater.
So one of the things I think is be kind of interesting to share, because I know you in recent years got into working out, lifting weights and stuff. And, one of the things we always hear is security professionals, it's a high stress job. We need ways to relieve the stress and kind of cope with things and help our mental health. So has that really helped you a lot as far as trying to help maintain your mental health?
Yeah, it definitely helps with the stress. Just a good way to get it all out, and just kind of a good way to disconnect, because whenever you're really lifting heavy weights, you're just thinking about that. You're not thinking about work. You're not thinking about that report that's overdue or whatnot. It's just kind of an escape. Something I can do a few times a week, sometimes during lunch, and yeah, it's kind of become my go-to hobby at this point. That and collecting records. You can probably see some of the collection over there. I've got over a bookshelf full.
Very cool. So kind of what kind of, I know what your music preference is, but if you don't mind sharing your listeners what your music tastes are like.
Mainly punk stuff, like old school punk. A little bit of other stuff, a little bit of metal, ska, dub reggae, stuff like that. But I mean, 90% punk.
Yeah. I remember you used to be into skateboarding when you're younger. Is that really what got you into listening to punk, or was it the other way around?
Actually, I was into rollerblading. I'd jump on handrails.
Oh, okay.
Rollerblades.
Oh, very cool.
It kind of coincided with it. Like I found out a bunch of punk bands from the skate videos, but I was kind of discovering on my own too. Like, just that's when like Green Day and Rancid were blowing up, and those were kind of my introduction to it. I'd heard the Ramones as a kid, like a young kid, but kind of liked it, but didn't really get into it. But Green Day and Rancid kind of got me into it.
Yeah, for me, the Ramones, there's a couple of songs I like, but like maybe not all of them. But yeah, I'm more of a Green Day person myself too.
The first 4 Ramones albums are great. The rest of it's kind of spotty.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually saw them live when I was like 14 or 15.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of Green Day, I actually took my daughter to a concert one time to see Green Day. That's been probably about 10 years ago or so, maybe a little less.
I think I saw them around that same time. Went by myself and I kind of got bored and left. It was a big concert, it's a big conference hall or big arena, and I was used to like going to little punk shows and like little bars and stuff, so it was just kind of boring.
Yeah, it just kind of loses that original vibe.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you still do any rollerblading or?
No, my knees can't take it. No, I'm going to teach my daughter how to do some regular rollerblading, but I can't jump it up on things and stuff. It's just I'm too old now.
Yeah, I used to like to rollerblade for a while. I started out on quad skates and used to skateboard and like any kind of skating, actually ice skating, which made it easier to learn how to ski.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to jump staircases and do like 540s over them and stuff. And like I had a practice grind rail at my parents' house that I'd spend hours on that thing. The neighbors would watch me and stuff, and then yeah, it was probably the most fun I've had was doing that stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing we survived through childhood, because one of the things we did too is we'd set up ramps and jump in on our bikes. And I remember one time my brother and I were riding on the same bike, and we jumped like this really messed up sidewalk in my grandparents' neighborhood where really the ground had shifted, and we just kind of jumped it. And we landed, and the fork of the bike broke off, and my brother landed, and it cut his chin open and had to go to the emergency room.
Yeah, I only had one concussion and a few broken hands.
So did your mom make you wear a helmet and all the pads and stuff?
They tried.
They tried?
Yeah, it didn't work.
Yeah, my mom went at this garage sale and bought us this big old white motorcycle helmet, which was kind of heavy for what we needed to do, but wanted us to wear a helmet, elbow pads, and knee pads when we rode skateboards.
Yeah, nowadays, like I built a little rail just to play around on like 5 years ago or something. It's like 4 inches off the ground and I'm wearing a helmet, whereas I used to jump on handrails over stairs not wearing a helmet. It's just like, yeah, I'm not gonna tempt the fates on that one.
You probably wonder now how you survived through all that, huh?
I mean, yeah, like one time I broke my hand and I didn't realize it was broken. I used it as an excuse to get out of school, and then doctor's like, well, I don't know. I'm like, what, if it's broken? I was like, no, if you have to have surgery or not. Ended up having to have surgery once I used to get out of school. I still have some pins in my hand from that.
Oh, wow. So we're getting down towards the end of the show. Is there any advice you'd like to share, or closing comments you'd like to give our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, like offensive security, it's something that you really have to be into. Like it's got to be your hobby to really excel at it. And, just start with the networking and stuff. Always coding, good way to go. I mean, I'd say like probably Python or Go, and just really stick with it, because one thing that I've done is jumped around too many languages and kind of like dabbled in a lot, but never really mastered one too much. So I'd say pick something and stick with it. General purpose would be Python, or if you want to get into exploit development, get into like C, C++, and assembly language. But yeah, just have fun with it.
Great advice. That's one of the things I've kind of learned too, is if you like doing it, then you're able to put the time and effort in. If it's something you don't like, you're not wanting to put in all those hours to learn. And it seems like you especially have to do that up front. Then of course, keeping up with it too.
Yeah. And I always kind of like learning. I kind of pursued certifications, not really for the cert all the time, but kind of like, oh, I want to know this. I'm just going to study it for this knowledge and then get the cert to kind of prove to myself that I've mastered this subject area.
Very cool. Well, thanks for taking time out of your schedule to join the podcast. It's been fun chatting with you.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks everyone. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to The Phillip Wylie Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, to learn more about Phillip, go to thehackermaker.com and connect with him on LinkedIn and Twitter @Phillip Wylie. Until next time.